Assalamu alaikum. Last week, but we are here, and that over there is
Abdurraheem Green, and that over there is
Abdul Haqq Baker,
and this is
a piece of cake.
We'll
Today, Abdurraheem, good to see you again after 2 weeks. I know that we've had a lot going on. I wanted to touch upon this. Thank you, Samira, because for those who don't know, I was Tony Baker, aka Anthony Baker, aka To Be back in the day. Wa alaikum salam, Jordan, and brothers and sisters who are joining us and guests. And the reason why I want to touch upon this, it should be quite obvious. We're seeing the trial of Derek Chauvin at the moment, the killer of George Floyd. And we all know how that panned out and transformed many realities in the last year. And what made me think about this today, and I spoke to Abdurraheem about it just a short while ago when communicating before coming on. As I was lying down yesterday after Fajr, my wife was leaving the room to start the day and everything. And she looked at me and she said something, Abdurraheem, and it shook me, because this is the first time I've been with my wife 38 years now, mashallah, tabarakallah, 39 coming up. And she looked down at me in the bed as she was walking out, because we've been watching the trial for the last 2 days. And it's triggering a lot of things for many people, and the stress, especially those witnesses. And she said, things could have been so different all those years ago. And I was looking at her thinking, where's she going with this? And she said, I could have been a single mother raising a daughter who had no siblings if things turned out any different to how they did. And she was speaking of none other than my arrest, detention, and the violence of that detention at the hands of the police following the 1989 Notting Hill Carnival. So when I put down here, living to tell the tale, some may feel, oh, that's exaggerated. What happened to him, to George Floyd, couldn't have happened to Abdul Haqq when he was a non-Muslim. It can't happen to young black men on the streets of London or the UK today. Well, just so everyone is aware, and those who haven't heard me recount this before, everything I've got here that I'm holding up now, I've kept. These are my trial papers, case papers of when I was arrested, my barrister's advice, my solicitor's work, the prosecution notes, the 8 police officers, you can see here, there is about 8 or 9 police officers who wrote and conspired with their statements to give one narrative to convict me and the colleagues who saved me, who rescued me. I had 6 colleagues here, alhamdulillah, all of them Muslim now, who saved me from what I went through. So, Abdurraheem, I want to bring this to draw parallels of what we see in Western society, America, and the UK. I want to bring that so those who are unaware become aware of a seismic, it is seismic, and a systematic and institutionalized behavior against us as black people. We spoke about this over and over again. And at the same time, while doing that, I want to dip back into the archives, because we had the riots of Brixton riots, which are nearly 40 years ago. And I want to speak to you concerning what your paradigm was at that time, when the Brixton riots were going on. What was your life? You were in a different strata of society to me, and it would have affected you differently. Also, when I was being arrested and brutalized after Carnival 1989, were you there? What was your experience? What were you into at that time? I think it's very important that we give, and I'll say it like that, a black and white perspective, literally, in that respect there. And is there any, with what I've just told you, imagine your wife saying to you, bringing back something that has triggered her, something's triggered her, and she brings it back and you realize, oh my gosh, this was the stress and the thoughts that have been with my wife for the duration of our relationship.
So what actually happened, bro? I'd like to know. So you were arrested and accused of what? Being
Basically,
black?
well, you could say
Sorry,
that.
bro.
You could say that. No, yeah,
Sorry,
I
bro.
think that's
I shouldn't laugh. I mean, but it's not funny. But
no,
yeah, anyway.
like we saw with Ahmed
Yeah,
Arbery. What you're saying, I know it's not funny, Arbery, but I'm
yeah,
glad you know I've got a lot of love and trust for you. I understand why there's that nervous humor.
yeah.
Remember
It is.
Ahmed
It is
Arbery?
literally. It's
Ahmed
just like,
Arbery was jogging. He was shot jogging while black. Remember a year or so
yeah, yeah,
ago.
yeah, yeah,
So I was arrested for being black, basically. But I'm going to read excerpts of some of the papers so that you understand what's happening. So basically, I'll read from the statement from my barrister. Bank holiday Monday, 28th of August, 1989. I was returning home in the company with friends at around 9 p.m. I was on the eastbound underground, traveling on the Metropolitan line between Westbourne Park and Royal Oak stations. You would know those stations, those who live
I
in
do. Yeah,
London.
of course.
Also present was a large number of police officers. Okay. I contend that in the course of my journey, I was unlawfully arrested and assaulted, taken from the train at Royal Oak, a London Underground station, and taken there to Paddington Green, where I was detained for several hours. The counter allegation, the police arrested me for violent disorder, contrary to Section 2 of the Public Order Act. And there were a large number of co-defendants with me, my friends, basically. So, Abdurraheem, what I want to do is describe what happened at that time. We left the carnival that evening. We
Yeah,
jumped onto the train. Okay. When we got on the train, a large presence of police officers followed us onto the train. Okay. One of them was staring at me. I tried to ignore him initially. I eventually went up to him. I'm not going to mention the officers' names. I don't think I need to. I've got them here. I asked him why he was staring at me like that, and he was acting all effeminate and everything, and I thought he was joking. Now, when I asked him, I didn't say anything more than that. There were other officers near me. That everything was good banter and everything. Then, as the train pulled into the station, he shouted, "Oi, John, we got a challenge here." I remember that very clearly. And I said, "I'm not challenging you." I tried to step back, but the next thing I read my statement now, the next thing I knew, this officer had grabbed me and his colleagues rushed towards me. I remember the train doors opening and other officers trying to push me out onto the platform. I don't know how many officers were there, but blows were flying all over the place. I recall a few of my colleagues holding on to me tightly, asking the police what they were doing and why they were doing it. Now, they then dragged me onto the platform. And I remember hearing my colleagues shouting, my friends shouting, and seeing the police running everywhere. Okay, I think they were attacking my friends. Now, this is why my friends got involved, Abdurraheem, and I'm going to say
yeah,
now, you know some of them, mashallah, because they saved me. I said here, I would not like to say how many officers pounced on me, but there were more than 8 of them. One of these officers grabbed me by my left index finger and started bending it backwards. At the same time, 2 other officers were holding onto my neck and pushing it a particular way. I thought they were going to break it. When they loosened their grip on my neck, I had no choice but to start bending down, as this officer had not let go of my finger. I managed to pull it out, but it was disjointed. It was dislocated. I folded my arms. I'm not going to continue. I'll go back to this in a little bit. I folded my arms under my chest to clip my finger back in place. They slammed it onto the floor, Abdurraheem, onto the cat when they put me on the platform. Then what happened? Flung me on the floor. The next thing I knew, an officer had put his foot on the right side of my face on the ground, facing away from the tube station. He's standing on my head. Another officer had his knee in the arch of my back. And other
yeah.
officers sitting on my legs, and the other ones cuffed me. Metal and wire cuffs. You can't see it, but there's a scar right here. Okay, so that's what happened. Now, when they pulled, friends of mine were getting arrested. And when my face was on the ground, like that, flat on the ground, I couldn't move because the boot was on my head. I could see what was happening with my friends. One of my friends, they put 3 wire cuffs from the wrist right up to his elbow, because he burst the first one. He's quite big. They put 3 wire cuffs on him. Okay. When they lifted me up, you might think, okay, they're going to help him up. No, they didn't, Abdurraheem. I wasn't able to kneel up. Remember, I had my cuffs behind my back, the boot on my face. Once they lifted the boot from my face, they pulled me up by the cuffs. By the cuffs. Okay. Put me on the next train, which they kept the carriage. They took me up off the platform upstairs, waited for I think, what is it? You requisitioned an empty train, which then came through, took me back down. And you know the handles that you can hold on to when you're standing up. You've got the hand, and when the ones where you've got the glass and you've got the people sitting just there beside you. Basically, they pushed me up against that, had their arm through there, and one of them, my face was against the glass by this time now, and he ripped my black t-shirt, ripped it off me. My jacket came off. I don't know what happened to that jacket, but ripped my t-shirt off me and started coughing, spluttering, and spitting on my back and my face as they took me to the next station. Then they took me upstairs, put me in the middle of the van, not on any seats, middle of the van, elbowed me back down with my cuffs behind. I was lying back on the ground like that. Now, my friends jumped in at the point they saw my body going limp and the way they were grabbing my neck and twisting it and pulling me in the other direction. And they said, we thought they were going to kill you. So this is what I faced and had to go to trial for this. We originally were going to Crown Court. When they saw we wanted trial by jury, they reduced it. For those who don't know, you've got offence category 1, 2, 3. This is when I was in the legal profession. When you bring it down to a category 3, you can't have a jury. You have to have it in the magistrate's court. The sentencing will be lesser, but you can still be imprisoned. So we weren't going to have trial by jury, okay? And that upset us because this is going to be a biased case. Abdurraheem, it was exactly that. It was exactly that. Remember, I was working in the legal profession. Yeah. At the end, when the Judge Noel, his name was, okay, quintessential upper class individual, he sentenced some of my friends. Some of them got off, some of them got fines. And I thought, I'm going to be sentenced there and then. He said this, and I'll as a witness, I can't remember, I can't forget these days. He said to me, no, I don't want to sentence you today, Mr. Baker. I do not want to sentence you today. We've run out of time. I have to go to play golf. I've got a golf tournament I want to go, or I'm meeting friends to play golf, sorry. He said, you're a nasty bit of work, because he saw that I work in the legal profession. He's coming from a good background in the sense that he's in the legal profession. How dare he? This is an affront that this black guy is in the legal profession and really he's a thug, he's a gangster, and I see you as the leader of all of your friends. So they postponed my date, and he said to the clerk, please make sure you adjourn this date, that his hearing, for me to be the one who gives the final decision. When I went back 6 weeks or so later, and he read out the charge, and he gave me a prison sentence. And even the prosecutor looked at him in shock, because I don't have a criminal record, alhamdulillah, even now. So it was, if I'm going to be found guilty of whatever it is, it's a first offence. And I remember looking back behind me, and the jailer was there ready to take me down. But I saw the prosecutor standing, my defence solicitor standing, and they were looking at the judge, and he was writing. Then he saw it was quiet. There was a bit of a commotion initially from the crowd. A lot of people came to see what the sentences was. And he looked up, and I remember him seeing them looking at him, and he said, okay, suspended for 18 months. But then he said I had to pay compensation to one officer who said I basically damaged his spine, all sorts of lies and concoctions. Now, at that point, Abdurraheem, like my boss, who was the senior partner of a firm, he came to give evidence for me as a character witness. But he said to me, if you do not succeed in appealing this case, you have to leave the firm. My career was finished, Abdurraheem. Now, my wife, coming back to my wife now, why did she make that statement yesterday? She was expecting our first child. We'd bought our second home. Things were going really well. This young black kid, I was 24, I think, 23 at the time. This young black individual, black kid, young man is doing well for himself. Yeah, South Londoner, street culture, but doing well in that instance. And that would have been ruined. And I would not have been able to go into the legal profession again or any such thing. So I appealed it, knowing that if I lost the case, that the sentence could have been increased and I may have gone to jail. I did that. So Abdurraheem, I'll stop at that particular point there. But as I've said to you, when I look here, these are the statements of these officers. Okay, some who were there, some who weren't there. And there were, I'm going to count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, one WP, one female officer, 12, 13, and an inspector, 14, 15, and the detective sergeant. 14 members of the police came together, sat down, handwritten, you can see here, and wrote and conspired how they could ruin me. After nearly arresting me with such force that my friends thought, and I thought they were going to break my neck. So we look today, that was 1989, Abdurraheem. Yeah. We look now, 2020, last year, George Floyd. We look at Ahmed Arbery. We look at, let's go back 2011, Mark Duggan and the riots that ensued after him being shot dead in Tottenham. Okay. It's relentless, Abdurraheem. It's relentless.
So now, I mean, why are you saying this? It's like you've got a black guy who's already had a commission. There's no more institutionalized racism. The government's published a report. It's all the past, bro. And, you know, like you guys came out of slavery and, you know, you just did a good job. You got yourself together and you became very British.
And, you know, Abdul, thank you for saying that.
Look how you benefited from slavery. You became very British and, you know, you combined your blackness with your Britishness and we transformed you out of savagery. And, you know, now you're decent, upright British citizens. And we're not racist.
And that's the frightening thing, Abdurraheem. That's
not institutionalized racism anymore.
What you're saying, my brother,
those
and,
are the battles.
thank you for being devil's advocate. But that is a view that is prevalent amongst white society in America and in the UK. Everything you've just articulated there, that ridiculous report that just came out and said that racism, and it was done by a token black man who is in government. And it's ridiculous. When we listen, I was watching a clip from, what's his name, David Lammy on LBC. And a white caller was saying to him, a woman, she's saying to him, you can't be English. You've got your, and she was saying what she's saying. She's saying you can be British. And he was disagreeing with her and saying, look, who is originally English anyway? And then he mentioned there are white Caribbean individuals who are more Caribbean than he is. And she said, yeah, that's because, see, this is the problem with everyone infecting each other. And he said, whoa, hold on a minute. That's a very strong statement. But what you've just articulated there, Abdurraheem, I have to say, that is the prevalent view. This is why the police are able to do what they're able to do. Remember Rodney King, when there were no mobile phones, what we saw in 1991, someone had their camcorder and we watched how they beat him until they got tired. It was like a blood sport and they got off. The jury found them not guilty. We see with what happened with, what's his name from last year, 2 years ago, who couldn't up his name. I've forgotten his name now. I remembered it recently. Who was first saying, I can't breathe. Okay. They got off. Trayvon Martin, they got off shooting individuals in broad daylight. They've escaped. Why? Because the Jim Crow era is still with us. Even if it's not known by that term in the UK, that thing where when black people are targeted, they won't call it blood sport, but it may as well be, because our lives, again, as we say, don't matter. So Abdurraheem, the riots, let's touch upon the riots as I did in one of the previous shows. When we look at what happened with the Brixton riots and why that just exploded as it did. And as you remember, we saw what happened in Toxteth in 85. We saw what happened again in Brixton in 85. We saw what happened in Tottenham, in Broadwater Farm in 85. Why did those riots kick off? Let's talk about the second Brixton riot in 85. Because a mother got shot and was paralyzed for life when the police kicked down the door looking for her son. Cherry Groce, Groce, got shot and was paralyzed, and when she died later on, years later, they said that her cause of death had been aggravated by the extent of the shooting that she received on that occasion, which sparked the riots. 2011 again, Mark Duggan. We saw riots over various parts of the UK because of that blatant shooting and the police trying to plant a weapon there, saying that it was his own gun, handgun, and that's why they went for him. So Abdurraheem, why am I, again, I'm bringing these papers here for the viewers to understand. Some of us are still around. Some of us had the wherewithal to fight the police. I'm not going to say the NWA song, F the police, which is another sentiment, and I won't get into that. That's for a different show. But I had the wherewithal to fight the police. and win. And win on that occasion. How many have that opportunity to do
in
that?
your appeal, you actually won. I mean, did anything happen to the police, or you just got off? Because winning would mean...
I sued them afterwards.
Alhamdulillah.
Sued them afterwards. By that time, as the trial date was coming, this is the interesting thing. As the trial date was coming, I think it just finished. Yeah, it was just coming. That's when I looked at my life and thought, if I go to jail, I know myself. I will either become worse and fulfill a stereotype that they've placed on me, or I'd have the opportunity to try and be better. And the only way I knew of being better, and the only example I actually had, was having read Malcolm X's autobiography and understood what happened to him in the end after I'd read it a few times. I didn't like what happened to him in the end initially. I liked all the rough gangster stuff, and that was what we related to, and I didn't really have resonance with the latter part until I read it again, and I realized if I go in, this was one of the things, I didn't want to be in prison without a spiritual foundation. And so I embraced Islam in 1990 before my final trial date, especially when my appeal case came up, knowing that I could go to jail for a longer sentence if they said we're going to give a stronger conviction, because they believed the police. But the judge actually said to them, you tried to besmirch, you falsely imprisoned, all of the charges that Mr. Baker's brought against you. You tried to besmirch the character of this young individual on account of my race. On account of my race. And that basically, he said, your statements are false. He did not accept them at all. But one thing they tried to do as well, Abdurraheem, is because I was able to call upon, I used to go to a church many, many years ago when in All Saints Church on Brudenell Road, in Tooting. And the priest there, he had become a deacon, an archdeacon in the Liverpool diocese. So I was able to get his contact details and ask if he'd be a character witness. And he said, yes, of course. So when he came down, not only were they trying to push about besmirching my character as being a black street individual who was by day a lawyer and by night a thug, this is what they were trying to paint the picture as, they also tried to question and challenge me as a Muslim. And they actually said to the archdeacon when they were questioning him, the defense for the police said, do you know that he's become a Muslim? And when he said that, the archdeacon's face, Nicholas Frayling, his name was, if you look him up, Nicholas Frayling, Frayling, lovely man. His face went red with anger. And he looked at them, he said, how dare you bring his faith, his chosen faith, into trying to besmirch his character and cause doubt in my mind as a priest, as an archdeacon. And the judge,
what's it got to do with it? Yeah,
exactly. And the judge I saw looking up and paying attention to this exchange here, and it silenced the defense lawyer for the police, because it was a cheap move. He said, I know this young man. I know his character, and while he may be like my street culture and whatever, he's not what you're trying to say he is, and he's not guilty of what you try to say he is. And how dare you try and test me or question me about his faith? So there are good people there, Abdurraheem. There are good. My lawyer, my boss came again.
Yeah,
quintessential middle class white men.
But would you say that may favor the argument that the system is not institutionally racist, that there is racism within the institutions, but it can work both ways, right? Sometimes, I mean, sometimes you meet the racism and sometimes you don't.
Obviously, sometimes you're going to meet the racism and sometimes you don't. But the question has to be asked: do we say that it is not there? I'm quite a stubborn individual.
Yeah, definitely it's there. I think like that's what they were saying in the report, that it's that they said we never. I mean, I you know what I think anyway. I had a whole YouTube thing on. I mean, basically the problem is systemic right down to the underlying philosophies. I think, Darwinism, evolution theory, the whole materialistic thing, it's deeply seeped in racist ideology, and it's not something that they can just simply get rid of the wave of a report.
The point you've made is an interesting one, because what we're seeing now, Like I've shown, I can't remember how many officers I've showed conspired to try and convict me and put me down. What we're seeing is something different. There's a contrasting picture we're seeing for once in America. We are seeing officers, line managers, first responders, white, quintessential American, breaking rank and giving evidence for the prosecution against Derek Chauvin. Unlike what happened here, well, all these police and came together, conspired. Some remained silent. Hear no evil, see no evil. But we're seeing a sea change. But just on this occasion, though, because it was that blatant. If social media hadn't been there, would we have the emphasis that we are seeing from the witnesses that are recounting what they saw? I hope to say yes, they would be, and that speaks to your point that the institutionalized racism is there. But it doesn't mean that everyone who is within that system is a purveyor of that racism. So the first responders, for example, were not speaking from a racist perspective. And the fact that they showed up to give evidence is indicative that they wanted to speak out against what they saw. We're seeing the line manager, the sergeant or whatever of Chauvin come in and saying, no, this was not common practice and what he did was wrong. They do not defend it at all. That's good. But in a sea of oppression against us, that's just a minority voice. Just like in the same way that report you've just mentioned says, racism doesn't have anything to do with anything, or it has very little. The person who's pushing that report again, he's there from an account of tokenism. When you say black people make it within Western society, as I've mentioned before, are we making it? In some rare instances, when we're doing for self and bucking the system, yes. But when they're fitting in government, the first minister, whatever it might be, no, then we are fitting into compartments that society has allowed us to.
Yeah, and I think this is the thing. I think this is a very, very good point that you raised, bro. Right, and even in the report, that's just implicit, isn't it? It's that racism is not there when you do what we tell you to do.
Exactly.
And didn't Malcolm X have a particular phrase for people like that?
House Negroes.
And there's a lot of. I'm glad you said it, bro. Because I mean, this is the same thing that I've always like. It's the same with the Muslims. It's the same with the Asians. It's the same with everybody, right? As long as you're the sort of Muslim that they, as long as you fit into their little, categories of what is acceptable to them, then that's fine. Right. Freedom of speech is there as long as you say what they want you to say. You're free to have whatever ideas you like, well, as long as they fit within the parameters of what we think are the right ideas. So
exactly.
I mean, recently someone had posted an article from the Secular Society saying that basically charities that propagate religion, it should be withdrawn as a category of permissible charities, basically.
Right. I mean, gosh.
I said for the Secular Society to comment on something like that is a bit like the Ku Klux Klan commenting on racism. Yeah. It's like, how could anyone take that seriously? Like, that's the Secular Society. But, they'll just push their nasty little perverted agenda in whatever way they can, right? And obviously they pick on Muslims. Right. They didn't pick on any extreme Christian things, but it's the same thing. It's like, as long as you're like, at the end of the day, why shouldn't a Muslim be free to challenge secularism? What if we think secularism is wrong? What if we think we should be, we should follow God's laws in the way that we live our lives, right? Why is that extreme or radical? Or, I mean, that's what human beings did for thousands of years, right? Yeah. Even in Christendom.
Yes.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what I'm saying, right? Is that, freedom of speech, as long as it's within these parameters.
Right.
Yeah.
And coming back to that, which is very true, bringing it back down, I want to refer back to the trial. Remember, as I said, the Judge Knowles hated the fact that there was what he saw, this token black guy who's in the legal profession, which is quintessentially white, and he's standing there defending himself as though he is part of our institution. And really, he's going to
it's
be
like,
punished.
how dare you?
Exactly.
How dare you step out of place?
Yeah. And even my barrister here, when I'm looking, when he was giving the initial advice, he said in paragraph 2, straight up on the first page, the facts of this matter are simple and straightforward. They make disturbing reading. Now, that was at that time, you know, with what happened to me. We have gone beyond disturbing reading and events which were not being recorded. If you just watch the trial, Abdurraheem, in the first few days of Chauvin, and you see all the different angles of the cameras and everything there, like for example, she works for the police, young lady who's watching all of the cameras and everything, okay, and she had a bird's eye view of what was taking place there. And she was the one who conveyed the signal, that the message that there may be a forgery or attempted forgery with the fake $20 bill. But she had a camera, and she said the reason this was more interesting because the other cameras around the city are just of bridges and just boring everyday things taking place. But what she watched when she saw the officers take him out of the car, and you could see their backs to her, to the camera, on top of him. She kept looking at other screens because she couldn't just focus on that screen. But when she came back to the screen, she asked her colleagues, is there something wrong with this particular feed and camera? Is it frozen? Is it frozen? And they said, no, there's nothing wrong with it. Subhanallah, that's how long they were on top of him.
Why did they even need to take him out of the car anyway? He was in the police car.
When you see the police cam, what you'll see is that George is saying, I'm claustrophobic. He's a big guy. I'm claustrophobic. Please don't do this to me. He got scared. He started panicking. So then they dragged him back out of the car. His legs kicked a little bit, but then they subdued him. And that's when Chauvin put his knee on his neck, and it was actually over 9.5 minutes. Let me ask you this, Abdurraheem. Which one of us would survive if we can't move and we've got someone with their knee on our neck?
Yeah, I mean,
for 9.5 minutes.
It's amazing he survived 9.5 minutes.
So, and you had,
if you study martial arts, you know it takes what, like if you cut someone's blood supply off, I think it's 3 minutes or something like it.
There was an MMA witness. Yeah. He gave evidence and he spoke to this effect. And you could hear him. They had his cameras shouting at them. You had a firewoman who was off duty, was walking. She saw what was happening. She came. You can hear her saying to them, I need to help. I can give first aid. Can you stop this? And she got so distressed that she started swearing at them as well. And they just didn't care. Chauvin was as calm as anything, just looking at them. So then the defense trying to say that he didn't move because he was distracted by a hostile situation. Even the senior officers who they had to report to and who saw what was happening said there was no hostility. The first responders, the ambulance men who came, said there was no hostility from the crowd. So the point is this, Abdurraheem, this made disturbing reading at my time, okay? Yeah. It pales into insignificance with what we've witnessed with him and all others who've been killed at the hands of the police, who've been abused at the hands of the police, okay? Who maybe don't have that wherewithal, is the only thing I can find, to step up and speak. But let me say something to you now, Abdurraheem. Some might say, well done, alhamdulillah, you got off this and you sued them and everything like that. Do you okay, you asked me, was that a success? That was a Pyrrhic victory. Okay, yeah. That was simply a Pyrrhic victory. Did I get harassed and have problems after that? Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I did. And then being Muslim by this time, it worsened. And I'm not going to go into all of that now. It worsened. What I've been arrested and charged for and taken off the plane and blocked from flights and everything like that was worse. And you might say, oh, so did you get charged with terrorism or anything like that, or radicalization? No, I didn't. I got arrested and off the plane, taken to, told to go report to a particular station, South Norwood Station. And there I was arrested and charged, DNA taken for attempted murder. I had to return to the country because they were going to put my name on Interpol. Interpol, sorry. Well, basically, they were asking me about a particular incident. I'd been involved in something before, way before, but not what had happened lately. They said you left the country the day after this incident where this individual was beaten so severely that his skull's fractured in many places. He's paralyzed now, can't speak, can't walk and everything. So they were thinking that this was a repetition, or this was an acceleration or a second round of a confrontation with this individual a year ago or a year beforehand or whatever. And I said I had nothing to do with it, don't know the individuals involved. It's just coincidental that I flew out the next day after this incident happened, but nothing to do with me. They kept that charge. They said, look, we don't usually bail people on attempted murder, but we're seeing the work that you're doing. Hear this plug now, just like Malcolm X. And sadly, as you well know, informant and all these slanderous accusations came, just like Malcolm X being pulled in by the FBI and spoken to. Some of those things happened. Yes, prevents another thing where I said, we're going to get ahead of the curve and we're going to work on our terms. But before that, as I was leaving the police station, then bailing me, and they didn't remove those charges for 9 months, kept calling me back, questioning different things, which I didn't have any answer for. They said when I was leaving, some have heard this before, we fear what happened to Malcolm X will happen to you. Those are the last words they said as they released me from the police station. So Abdurraheem, it doesn't end for us, okay? Being black where doesn't end, alhamdulillah, but what comes with being black in a Western, institutionally, systemically racist society doesn't end for us. Now, Abdurraheem, mashallah, you've got children, mixed heritage children, mashallah, tabarakallah, but it will be known that their father is white and everything like that. We have fears. I know we all have fears for our children, but we have fears that what we faced will continue generationally for our children, for our sons particularly. And that's even more alarming than what we faced. So there's some serious issues that are there at play. And as we commemorate 40 years of the Brixton riots, have things changed? Some have said, no, things have got better. Again, you and I agree. No, you've allowed there to be more compartments that black people can move into and in inverted commas succeed. And you'll often see, as I said, there's a degree of house Negroism that comes in. And when you look amongst the Asian communities as well, we look at Saadia Javid, we look at Priti Patel, we look at the ugly reality of what she's doing. You'll see that those who come from within the ethnic minorities try to be more British or more American. Look at Nikki Haley, who was the representative at United Nations for the Trump administration. She's Native American, but if you look at the census and how she registered herself as white. You've got individuals there. You've got individuals who come from our ethnicities who are trying to be more white than you. More white than you, because they want to be there in the upper echelons of society. Now, what we've got to remember, let's remember one thing, Abdurraheem. Before this construct of racism as we see now, imperialist racism that we see now, and we go back to the 15th century, you had black people, princes, businessmen, everyone living, residing in the UK without this construct of racism. We had those from the Roman Empire here. We had aristocracy that was black, and they found the remains of this particular woman and the wealth that was surrounding her as she was buried. You had all of that there before. So those of us who are, or those from our ethnicities, who we would term as house Negroes, they need to look back at the 15th century, the 16th century, and see that these people of their own merit, of their own worth, of their own self-dignity and self-assuredness moved amongst Western European societies, and the societies embraced them because of the ethics and everything that they came with. Not what we see now, that in order to be accepted, I've got to be whiter than white. I've got to be more European than the Europeans themselves. And I'm talking white Europeans because there are black Europeans. I'm Afropean, consider myself. So at the end of the day, seeing that from within our ethnicities perpetuates it for the rest of us. Perpetuates it for the rest of us. When you've got academics who are very articulate and have some very good views, like Coleman Hughes in America, and you've got, what's that woman's name? I can't know, Candace Owen, And these individuals, yeah, we would call them from the UK perspective, coconuts. Others will call them house Negroes. Both are the same in that particular instance. And while they may have some relevant and pertinent points, it obfuscates, it obscures the issue at hand, that the societies that we are in oppress us as minorities. And I said it before, and you and I have discussed it before. How do we solve this? How do we remove this? We go back to the society of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we saw what dismantled an age-old, strong society of the Makkans, and it was none other than Tawheed that permeated and spread throughout the society, so much so that those of the aristocracy had to submit to it, or bow down to it, or concede to it. And some might say, how's that going to happen here? We had people like what's his name, Quilliam, Mr. Quilliam himself, and some of the aristocracy of the British, the English from centuries ago, who embraced Islam without compromise, who embraced Islam. So compromising is not the option when it comes to our faith, with regards to, I'm talking about the pillars, the foundations of the faith, making it hybrid to have half Christian, half Muslim, like Nation of Islam tried to do. No, Islam is Islam. Okay, the Sunnah is the Sunnah, in the balance, the Sirat al-Mustaqim, not the extremism we see one way or the other, the progressive liberalism and the extreme, violent extreme on the other side. No, Islam spread because of those of us who were in the middle. And that's what needs to be articulated and also acted upon.
I think it's very interesting to go back to what you were saying in the 16th century, in the time of the Romans. I think it seems to me that racism seems to be really tied up with nationalism, the whole idea of a national identity. And that's why, like you see, I even wonder how, if racism is a relatively new thing, like in terms of color, like, the way we understand race now, it seems to be, it may be a relatively new thing.
It is.
And it seems to be, because, you're talking about that woman who was saying, basically she's saying, like condemning mixing of the races and saying you're not really British, basically, because she's saying you're not white, therefore you can't really be British. Right? And it really seems to be the forging of a particular nationalistic identity. And I think nationalism is a very nasty, dangerous disease, actually. And you can see it constantly trying to be revived. And that's what's happening across Europe now, with all of, in Hungary, in Austria, here in the UK, in France. Along with this nationalistic identity seems to come this intrinsic racism. There always has to be someone or something to hate. There always has to be some other, because you only really can identify yourself, who you are, by, in a sense, comparing yourself with someone or something that is not you. And that is obviously going to be people of a different color or people of a different religion. Thus the Muslims being picked
There's
on.
a good point. That's a very good point, Abdurraheem. Sorry to interject, but yeah, the construct of racism, according to what the definition you gave, we saw that happen with the transatlantic slave trade, when they had to make a demarcation of blackness to commoditize it. And therefore we saw the white Irish and others who were not considered at the same strata as the other European whites suddenly become white, and they were shocked.
I think initially they weren't they? Initially they were Irish, they were slaves, and they were all treated the same.
Exactly.
They were all treated the same, but they realized that they needed someone. It was because, they needed to forge this, this rationalization.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And that's right. But also, Abdurraheem, about that, coming back to what you said about nationalism, I agree to an extent. And I would say that's, on the whole, that's toxic nationalism. But I believe there's a nationalism where you can have an affinity to where you're from, so long as it doesn't involve xenophobia. What do I mean by that? When we look at our Salaf, when we look at the tribes at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and we saw what toxic nationalism looked like when the Aus and Khazraj started calling upon each other's tribes before. That's when the Prophet ﷺ really condemned them on that aspect there. But then we had Shu'aib al-Rumi. Okay, we had others. When we look at our scholars, Baghdadi, not the ISIS terrorists, but we had, what is it? I can't remember the Salaf's name. We had them, Imam al-Bukhari, he's from Bukhara, As-Sabuni. We had these individuals with appellations, many of us showing that there was an attachment and an affiliation to where they came from. And the reason I'm speaking about that now is because some of us as Muslims, black Muslims, when we talk about blackness now, and we're not talking about it in a xenophobic way, but no one else is upholding blackness and black excellence except us, okay? And when we speak about that, we're accused not only by non-blacks, but by other blacks who I believe, dare say, some of them have become Arabized, whatever it is, Asian-fied or whatever, say, no, Islam, Islam. Yeah, we agree, Islam, Islam. But Allah tells us in Surah Hujurat that he made us into tribes and nations to know each other. Okay, we know the best of us is the one with taqwa, but it does not mean now that we bury our ethnic origins, that we are ashamed of our ethnic origins. So acknowledging blackness, acknowledging Britishness, acknowledging Africanness, Asianness, whatever, as long as it doesn't lead to the toxic nationalism and xenophobia that you're speaking about there. And I'll bring the example of the Aus and Khazraj again.
But I mean, you know, things like Al-Brittani, Al-Albani, Al-Baghdadi, and so on, they're just appellations to identify where a person, maybe not even where they're from originally, it just may be where they're actually, you know, resided, spent the most of their time sometimes, right? So, yeah, I don't know about
That's
that.
a good point. And yet to clarify,
it's an interesting concept. I think that, I don't know,
the Prophet spoke about Asabiya.
I have to think about it a lot. Like my inclination, my personal inclination is, you know, I suppose I'm an internationalist. I would love to. I just don't. I don't like the idea of borders. I don't like the idea of people distinguished. I've just seen too many problems come from it, too much negativity. I don't see the solution to this problem of racism by reviving, you know, some sort of pride in your race.
Can I ask a question then?
But maybe that's just because I have white privilege. No idea.
I was just going to say that. Maybe because you've not had to worry about who you are. You have not had to worry about oppression of your people, your lineage. You've not had to worry about traversing society and coming up against obstacles, microaggressions, obvious oppression and subtle oppression in that instance there. You've not had to worry about that.
Sure.
So in that instance, imagine now, let's look at some expats who are living abroad, and we see that they may be discriminated against in some instances, okay? They may be discriminated if they're in Africa as a minority. So then their Britishness or Europeanness comes right up. You're in the Middle East, for example, where, okay, you're idolized in a small eye when you're over here. But those of you who come over and see that there may be a national pride as an Arab, a national pride as an Asian, in whichever society that you're in, you're going to lean back to your nationalism and your nationalistic tendencies to hold on to who you are and where you are. If you had that complete internationalist approach in such circumstances, you would be seen as someone who doesn't know your identity. You'd be seen as someone who's very, very malleable in that particular instance there.
But not necessarily. I'd still say that I have a strong, I think that there are other identities that are much more worthwhile hanging on to. Like, for example, like, you know, the people you're criticizing, but I think you can hang on to your identity as a Muslim, right?
Yes.
And you can say that these other things are superficial, they don't matter, right? Obviously, there are other identities that you could hang on to. Maybe I'm not saying these are good ones, but I'm just saying, for example, class, education, even common interests, like
Right.
football team or something like. I know it sounds.
Yes.
I know I'm.
No, you're right.
I know
You're
I'm
absolutely
making it
right.
trite, but I'm sure amongst there's some people they don't like. As long as you support my football team, I don't care what color of skin you are, and I don't care
Absolutely
how you talk. Right? That's how they see their tribe. Their tribe literally is that. So I think people
to speak to that.
Yeah.
What you said is absolutely. Back in the day when we were going to a nightclub, and I remember we came out of Victoria, and there were all these skinheads there. Okay, and they saw us coming. All these black guys coming with our girlfriends and everything. And they were all there, and amongst them, in their DMs and everything like that, was one black guy, and he was doing the Zeke highlight, and he was part of them. So it speaks to what you know. But why?
Yeah.
Maybe because he espoused the whole culture of skinhead. And remember, skinheads love ska music and everything like that. So it speaks to exactly what you're saying in that instance. It can be of identity. But speaking about the Muslim identity, which we hold on to proudly, it becomes an issue. You and I have spoken about this. When the predominant Muslim communities we're in show ethnic racism towards you and me.
Yeah. It definitely confuses it. It's definitely a problem. I mean, like I said, we've been through this before. I mean, I never felt treated anything except as like completely welcome. And as a brother in Brixton, I was a khatib there. I never felt out of place. I never felt anyone treated me any differently. But I mean, we were all united very much by a very, fervent idea, not only in Islam, but a particular understanding of Islam,
Right.
So I think that gave us a strong, sense of unity. And I don't know, bro. I mean, it's a very, very big subject, and it's hard. Like I do recognize it's hard to talk about it from a particular position of, you could say, of privilege, and I recognize that. But I don't think, on the other hand, it excludes a person from having, their opinions and even wishful thinking, and like you could say, oh, that's wishful thinking, and you don't understand. No, it's true. But you still hope for something which you think is going to be better for all human beings,
The sad reality, Abdurraheem, and I agree with you. Returning to the George Floyd incident, okay, he didn't live to tell the tale. He hasn't had an opportunity to kick the system and what they were doing to him. Instead, we see the knee that killed and snuffed him out. And what I was able to, I was found guilty wrongfully. I appealed and won my case. And I'm watching now. I was asked on social media, don't you think the evidence is strong against Chauvin, and that he will win, that he will be imprisoned? And I said, I've got absolutely no confidence that will happen. I've seen people killed in broad daylight. I saw my case. The evidence was compelling against the police, but the system supported them. Judge Noel supported them to find me guilty initially, and then it was because of the overwhelming evidence and the character witnesses that came out of the woodwork to support me in my appeal case that I was able to get off. And so I have no confidence that Chauvin's going to be found guilty in this trial, because I've seen too many times in other cases where that hasn't happened and people have got off. But the one thing I would say where I was able to derive satisfaction at that time was about a year or two later, when I was traveling to work. I maintained my job in the legal profession as a fee earner and everything. And I remember traveling on from East Croydon. I jumped on the train. My second home was in West Croydon. I jumped on the train and I was in the first class carriage. And as I was traveling, I saw someone. I was like, I recognized this person. I was trying to join the dots of where I recognized them. And as we got off at Victoria, we alighted at Victoria, and then we went onto the underground, and I stayed in eye shot of the person. I was like, I know this person. I know this person. Then it clicked. That's Judge Noel. That's Judge Noel. So what I did, and I'm going to show you, what I did is I made sure we got on the same carriage. I made sure that we walked on the same direction. We got off at Oxford Circus. And as we walked, and everyone's going, and I said, good morning, Judge Noel. And he turned around and goes, oh, yes, hello. He saw me in my suit and everything. Hello. He didn't recognize me. He said, you don't remember me, do you? And he said, no, I dare say I don't. And he's quite a tall, imposing man, not much taller than me. So I said to him, you convicted me a year or so ago of something that I didn't do. And you chose to sentence me separately from my other colleagues. And his face went red and he put his head down. He became like a lamb and he said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I looked at him and said, no, it's okay. I said, you know what? I appealed, I won, and I sued the police. And I looked him straight in the face. I was not threatening. I'm being clear now. I didn't do my South London, I'm going to be aggressive. I had my briefcase, I was in my suit, because I wanted to make sure that he was not intimidated in any way to say, oh, I felt I was in danger. I said to him, I sued, I won my case. And I just looked at him and I said, and this is where this was the power I had at that moment. And not that I relished it, but to show him, this is how I work. So you can go now. And he put his head down and he scurried off like the rat I believed he was. Now, a lot of people said, wow, you had that opportunity. And remember, I was Muslim as well. So I wanted to make sure.
It's like out one of those movies, man.
No, but seriously, Abdurraheem, I remember that so well. But you know what? Let me show you the white privilege now. My boss, who came as a character witness for me, and he may be watching this, and we're still friends and colleagues to this day, who gave witness for me in the magistrate's court and in the appeal case. I went to work straight afterwards feeling really proud of myself, and I conducted myself. I didn't do what I would usually do and everything. And I told him, and he got really upset. How dare you put somebody in that position? And I didn't get it at first. It's like, whoa, I thought you was going to be on my side and well done and hats off to you and everything like that. But as I've spoken to him later as well, and I told him, and not so long ago, this was the white privilege. And because I'd got off the case now, you felt it's all done and dusted. I can get on with my life, and that you have now made a white judge, someone from the same level and of privilege as me, feel uncomfortable. How dare you do that, especially after I've been a witness for you? So that's how it came back round from my very boss who was supporting me not to go to jail, giving good character witnesses, but me having a moment to say, Judge, no, you did this. This is how I responded. This is how I won my case. And then my boss was upset with me for even doing that. That's how deep this whole thing is when we talk about perceptions and institutionalization and white privilege. That yes, and like we said, a white man can be married to a black woman and still be racist. A white man can be married to an Asian and still be racist. These are realities.
Yeah, you outed me, bro. I'm just joking. My wife, every day she calls me a colonizer. That's it. you colonial. That's it. But then anyway, I call her Genghis. So there we go. Like, we have a joke about that.
No, mashallah. Jazakallah khair. I felt it important because this whole Derek Chauvin, George Floyd, and not just him, Breonna Taylor and everyone else, the Brixton riots coming back up. And I spoke about that in the Baker broadcast, and we were on the periphery. There were riots and skirmishes taking place in Balham. They blocked off at Clapham North. They blocked us off from getting into Brixton and everything. And we had the anger of those 40 years ago, because as you know, I've spoken to you many times about it and on these shows about being stopped and arrested from the age of 12, 13, thrown into the back of that. So all of that, Abdurraheem, right up to where we are now, again, this is our reality. And I'll end on this, Abdurraheem. I was asked recently, how do you feel living in a Muslim country? And you know what, when I thought about it, and I know that brother Mutabil spoke about it, what's his name from Outcast, Outlaws, used to be with Tupac Shakur. He said this a little while ago, and I thought about it when I was asked this the other day. I don't worry when I hear sirens. I don't worry when I see the police. I'm not always looking over my back and thinking, am I going to get stopped? I see armed police here. I see armed police in Saudi. You see them smile at you. You can say Salaam Alaikum, and they say Wa Alaikum Salam back. I'm not going to talk about all the other issues that might be there and whatever, but I'm saying as a black man, I've lived in two societies, Saudi, Jeddah, and here where I am now. And I do not worry or tense up when I hear sirens or see police. Right up until living in the UK, and it's my home, every time we saw the police. And some might say, yeah, but you worked at grassroots and you did the prevent and everything like that. Hold on, I was being stopped, arrested, detained at airports, even traveled abroad, and all sorts of things to try and compromise me, even though I wasn't one of the bad guys. So the whole paradigm of not having the police, the British police, or living in society like the UK and in America and living abroad in a Muslim country, I can't describe the relief that I feel in this existence. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, bro. Subhanallah. Well, I've been with you, man. As we've said before, I was there on that return from that trip from Wales. I saw it firsthand, and I was looking at you like, "Whoa, is going on?" So I like from all those years ago. I totally get it, bro. I do, and you know, may Allah make everything easy for you, bro, and everyone. You know,
I mean,
all we can do, bro, is just work at it, man. You know, all of us together, just keep chipping away at the old block, and
right.
you know, hope there's some sort of change, because any improvement is worth working for, right? You know,
Absolutely. But do you know what would be beautiful? Where we
yeah.
start? Let's start cleaning up our own backyards. Muslims, we got to remove this racism against each other, the ethnic racism and everything. If we remove it and we really show and epitomize what Islam came with and what Islam stands
Absolutely.
for, as a Muslim bloc, from society's perspective, globally, one, we'll see more people come into Islam because they will see it as a refuge. Secondly, they will see the solidarity that we have irrespective of color and ethnicity. So we need to start cleaning up our own backyards. And as we said many times, you and me, Abdurraheem, if we start in our own sphere, our own circles, and we get rid of the ethnic racism that permeates us.
Absolutely, bro.
We will start in a good way. And yes, the brother Hussein said a lot of people fear the police in Saudi Arabia. You're saying most police officers in Arabia fear Allah. Most police officers in Arabia fear Allah. Yeah. Sorry, I get what you're saying, Hussein family. Yeah, that's a good point. Not all, but they to different degrees. But yes, when there's that cognizance, when there's that awareness of your creator, you have to be just when you're in positions of power. You've got to be. And when you abuse those positions of power, as we see in America, as we see in the UK, there's no fear of Allah there. In fact, I don't even want to go down that road. That's another conversation. But Abdurraheem, really, I think that we need to start in our own backyards.
Yeah, I agree.
And once we've done that, we can then become examples for others, inshallah.
Definitely, bro. I agree with that. Start with, you know, as they say, you know, work globally, and then you'll feel effects. No, work locally to make changes globally. Like you got to deal with what's in front of you. There's no point us going on about what's going on in America or anywhere else in the world, right? Whether it's about racism or any other subject, to be honest, right? Like we need to deal with what's in front of us. That's what we need to do.
Right. It's like we'll conclude on this, Abdurraheem. It's like what's happening in Burma and Myanmar now. The world is up in arms about what's taking place, and you've got the citizens there up in arms about what's taking place. But those citizens remained silent when we saw what was happening with the Rohingyas. Did they not know that what goes around comes around? And I'm not saying that to chastise them, because what's happening to them is atrocious. But it's the same military that's doing what they are doing to them now, and what they did to the Rohingyas. So we've got to be really careful when we hear no evil, see no evil, because it's not affecting us, my community, my ethnicity, that when it comes back with a vengeance upon us.
Absolutely, man. It's very true, bro. It's very, very true. That's the, you know, that's the sunnah of Allah. That's the way of the world. That's really.
You've gone quiet.
Keeps trying to ring me.
Oh, okay. What we do on that, Abdurraheem, as you said, it's the sunnah of Allah, and it's what comes around. And I think, Jazakallah khair, you've been patient with me going through this experience, reliving I've kept that for archival records.
It's really interesting, bro. I really appreciate it, man.
I hope others have benefited from this.
Definitely.
And I like the comments that have come, Sister La Roque and others. Thank you for your comments and usual input, really engaging. And thank you, Sarah. Yes, justice for all, no matter the race or class. Totally agree. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Yes, we need to get to work. Brothers and sisters, listen to the message. Read the message from Lalla Rook. We need to get to work. Let's stop giving it lip service, inshallah. So we look forward to seeing you next week. And then I think we're going to have to see about the schedule in Ramadan. Thank you, Noah, for your comments. Wayak. And we look forward to speaking to you very, very soon. Wayak, Sister Sharon. Thank you for your comments, as always. Abdurraheem, that is Abdurraheem Green in that corner.
And that's Abdul Haqq Baker. And this has been a
piece of cake. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.